Step into the world of Dolores O'Riordan, the powerful voice that defined the Cranberries and shaped 90s rock with unforgettable hits like Linger and Zombie. Discover how her strict Catholic upbringing, unwavering determination, and raw talent launched her from rural Ireland to international stardom, leaving a lasting imprint on modern music. Dolores O'Riordan was born in 1971. The youngest child, Dolores had to find her voice in a home where everyone else was older, stronger, or just plain louder. But she had something none of her siblings could match, a vocal talent that felt like a gift from another realm. By age 5, she was already performing for her classmates, standing on a piano under the request of her teacher, an early sign that she might be special. However, her early life wasn't all about music and bright aspirations. There were tough realities. Growing up Catholic in rural Ireland meant limited exposure to the pop culture that was exploding elsewhere. She wasn't listening to top 40 hits or drooling over rock bands on TV. Her influences were far more traditional: Irish folk tunes, classical compositions, and the sacred echo of Gregorian chants. She would later recall playing the church organ for nearly 8 years, absorbing every bit of that spiritual resonance into her bones. That musical environment gave her a sense of melody, a sensitivity to timing, and a reverence for the emotional weight of sound. The influence of those classic and liturgical tones would eventually weave into her own vocal style, giving it the ethereal quality that set her apart from so many contemporaries. Of course, strict Catholic upbringing also meant a certain separation from the modern fun stuff. Dolores wasn't exactly free to go out partying or blasting the latest pop hits in her room. Her mother had big aspirations for her daughter. She wanted Dolores to get a university degree and teach music, but the lure of songwriting and performing was already bubbling under Dolores's quiet exterior. At age 12, she wrote her first song, Calling, an intimate confession about feelings for someone older. It might sound scandalous now, but for a shy Irish girl stepping into her teenage years, it was her raw honesty taking shape. She became that kid in school who was always scribbling lyrics and noodling out chord progressions in her head, the girl who wrote songs. With very few girlfriends in the neighborhood, and mostly older brothers, Dolores found herself in a boy's world. She was a tomboy, wearing pants and climbing trees, adopting that tough, no-nonsense attitude. Part of it was the environment. In her own words, she felt that mothers and other Irish women around her tended to favor the boys, so she had to step up if she wanted to be heard. Maybe that unorthodox sense of independence was exactly what ignited her creative fire. Her upbringing, as it turned out, wasn't always safe or carefree. She later revealed that starting at the age of 7, she had been harmed by an older man, an experience that haunted her for years. Trauma like that seeps into a person's psyche, and for Dolores, music became a way to process pain, to pour her emotional truth into haunting, melancholic melodies that resonate with people who felt life's sharper edges. She had other difficulties too. She witnessed one of her sisters accidentally set the family home on fire. She once described her childhood as having a lot of secrets. For someone whose entire adult life would be in the limelight, it's remarkable how much she had to keep under wraps early on, how much her worldview was shaped by the notion that you could hide an entire universe of pain behind a single smile. But let's fast forward to 1990. Dolores, now around 18, catches wind of a local band called Cranberries needing a new singer. Up until that point, Cranberry Sauce was more of a jokey ensemble, performing comedic tunes like Throw Me Down to Big Stairs. Not exactly the stuff that would tear up the radio charts, but an evolution was in the works. Guitarist Noel Hogan and bassist Mike Hogan, along with drummer Fergal Lawler, wanted a new, shimmering, dreamy sound, a shift from silly jokes to something more reflective, atmospheric, and personal. They put out the call for a female vocalist, hoping that might lead them in the right direction. Dolores, carrying her keyboard and a heart full of original songs, arrived for an audition in Limerick. Some auditions begin with small talk. This one began with shock and awe. Noel recalls being floored by her voice, like it was something intangible, as if it could fill an entire cathedral or cut through a gale-force wind. Dolores, for her part, didn't love the material they had, but she sensed their potential. She took a simple 4-chord instrumental track home, and a week later returned with full lyrics and melody. That song turned out to be Linger, which became one of the Cranberries' biggest hits and remains an iconic 90s anthem. The story behind Linger is sprinkled with youthful heartbreak. Dolores had a fling with a 17-year-old soldier stationed in Lebanon who broke her heart, and the entire track basically poured out from that bittersweet well of emotion. Maybe the best songs are the ones drawn from real lived experience, and from the earliest days, Dolores' writing was anchored in honesty. There was a broader sense that this girl and the band were perfectly matched. Dolores saw her local music scene dominated by guy-centric groups who weren't exactly busting out soul-bearing confessions in their lyrics. She suspected no one in Ireland, let alone in Limerick, would truly get her brand of emotional intensity. But the synergy with the Hogan brothers and Fergal was undeniable, and together they started shaping a sound that caught the attention of the local musician Pierce Gilmore, who owned a studio called Zurich. He helped them record a 4-track demo called Water Circle, and soon enough they were playing their first gig in the basement venue Ruby's in Limerick. They were hardly rock stars yet. Fergal remembers how Dolores sang with her body turned sideways to the crowd, and the rest of them pretty much stared at their feet. But the seeds were planted. Something in that combination of her unusual lilting voice and the band's melodic approach had a distinct charm. Then an interesting twist occurred. Someone who received the demo miswrote their name on the return address as simply the Cranberries. The band liked the ring of it, or at least found it simpler, so they ditched sauce. And so the Cranberries were officially born. Demos in hand, Noel Hogan did something bold. He sent them out to record labels and radio stations, not expecting a big reaction. He was wrong. The cassette tapes started rousing interest in the UK, particularly from Rough Trade Records. Then a few more major players like Virgin, Island, and EMI jumped into the conversation. Not bad for a band whose biggest dream was maybe to play a decent local pub gig and not embarrass themselves. Suddenly, they were thinking about record deals, leaving their day jobs and playing a label showcase in a local university. Imagine being so fresh that you only have about 6 songs in your entire repertoire, and 32 label execs show up from London, all wanting to see if you're the next big thing. Dolores recalled being terrified, but also deep down determined. The band eventually chose Island Records, which was home to U2. Having that iconic Irish group as label mates felt like an omen of success. But success never unfolds in a neat, tidy line. The band hit a few snags. They parted ways with Pierce Gilmore when early sessions for their first full-length album took a less than ideal direction. Gilmore's attempt to sprinkle in dance beats and industrial guitars clashed with Dolores's more organic, heartfelt approach. Enter producer Stephen Street, famous for working with the Smiths and later Blur, who reined in the arrangements and helped sculpt the distinct airy yet grounded sound that would define the Cranberries. Their debut album came out in 1993 with a curious title, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? The label's marketing strategy was cunning. Build alternative and college radio buzz, then break into the mainstream. Dreams, the first single, slipped onto Modern Rock Tracks charts, and soon MTV was spinning the music video. The track was mesmerizing, a swirl of atmospheric guitars and Dolores' voice, sweet yet carrying a subtle edge of longing. The approach worked. Over time, Dreams and the next single, Linger, became hits, especially in the US. The album didn't blow up immediately in Europe, but it eventually climbed to #1 in the UK. By that time, the Cranberries had caught the attention of the entire alternative rock scene. With over 6 million copies sold worldwide, 4 million in the US alone, this was a stunning debut, outpacing even U2's Boy as the best-selling first album from an Irish band. The group didn't rest on their laurels. They started sketching out songs for their sophomore record, while on the road promoting the first album. Conventional wisdom says that the sophomore slump is real, yet the Cranberries managed to dodge it gracefully. Released in 1994, No Need to Argue was an even bigger smash, buoyed by a track that would become one of the most iconic protest songs of the 90s, Zombie. Originally just an acoustic demo Dolores hammered out on a lonely night during a UK tour, Zombie would evolve into a fierce statement about the violence in Northern Ireland, specifically referencing the Warrington bombings that killed 2 young boys. Imagine an emotionally charged young woman living through an era when news of bombings and sectarian conflict were painfully commonplace, deciding enough was enough. With her iconic keening wail on that chorus, she unleashed a raw, grunge-adjacent edge. The heavy distortion, pounding drums, and the lyric, "In your head they are fighting," became a communal cry of frustration, heartbreak, and condemnation of senseless killing. Some critics say that song alone catapulted the Cranberries from a beloved alt-rock band to a global phenomenon. But here's a twist. Their label, Island Records, didn't want Zombie as a single. They worried it was too political, too aggressive, and out of step with the Cranberries' signature melodic pop rock vibe. Word has it they even tried waving a big check at Dolores to steer her toward a more traditional track. She famously tore up that check, refusing to muzzle her creative impulse. She wasn't just the sweet voice behind Linger, she had serious convictions. Her ex-manager, Alan Kovac, remembered her as physically small, seemingly fragile, yet frighteningly determined. She believed the Cranberries could stand on the global stage, that they weren't just a band for the lovesick and introspective, but for anyone hungry for sincerity, truth, and emotional catharsis in rock music. The bet paid off. Zombie shot up to #1 on rock charts around the world. Its video, featuring Dolores in gold paint surrounded by child angels, intercut with harrowing scenes of conflict. The video was directed by Samuel Bayer, the same guy behind Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. The combination of the eye-catching imagery and Dolores' unstoppable vocals left an indelible mark on the decade's cultural memory. No Need to Argue sold nearly 20 million copies, a staggering figure that dwarfed even their breakthrough. But it wasn't all politics on that record. The other songs displayed Dolores' introspection, exploring betrayal, heartbreak, and the more painful side of relationships. In truth, the band was riding high, but the heavy touring schedule, combined with massive international press, soon tested their limits. The mid-90s were a swirl of interviews, magazine covers, and rumor after rumor, especially in the British press. British journalists, once praising them as the new Smiths, turned fickle. Wild headlines about Dolores' mental state, alleged fights within the band, and potential breakups became tabloid staples. One paper, the Daily Star, printed a story claiming Dolores had pranced on stage in Hamburg wearing no underwear. She sued for libel, won a settlement, and donated the money to charity. Another Irish tabloid staked out her home, photographing her going about mundane tasks, twisting it into speculation about a breakdown and the band's imminent dissolution. Her frustration with the media found its way into the track Free to Decide on their third album, To the Faithful Departed. Yet somewhere in the chaos, Dolores found love. She married Don Burton, the tour manager of Duran Duran, who later worked with the Cranberries. She called him her protector, someone to shield her from the more predatory aspects of the music industry. And it was a predatory environment, especially for a young female fronting a band of mostly guys in the 90s. Dolores said men in the business tried to push her into all sorts of uncomfortable situations. She was relieved to be married and off the market, as she put it, feeling a sense of safety in that stability. By the time the band started touring No Need to Argue, cracks were forming. Fame can be a double-edged sword. You want recognition for your art, but the cost can be more than you bargained for. They performed at huge events like Woodstock '94 and appeared on MTV Unplugged, but they also dealt with fiascos, such as a free outdoor show in Washington, D.C. that spiraled out of control. Expected to draw 3,000 fans, more than triple that number showed up. There weren't enough police. The band was late, the crowd got restless, and only about a song and a half into the set, the chaos forced the organizers to pull the plug. Rocks and bottles started flying. The band was whisked off stage, and in the mayhem, Dolores' acoustic guitar went missing, presumably taken by some rowdy fan. These mounting pressures crept into the sessions for the third album, To the Faithful Departed, released in 1996. The record's name hinted at a Catholic prayer, but inside the songs contained references to war, child casualties, and global conflicts, building off the approach of zombie. Critics found some of these efforts a bit naive, like Dolores was well-intentioned, but out of her depth. Sales dropped compared to the previous two albums, although it still moved a respectable 4 million copies worldwide. Dolores confessed to Billboard that they'd been running on fumes by then. They hadn't taken a real break in 3 years, bouncing from tours to recording studios and back again, her mental and physical health frayed, culminating in cancellations of gigs. A series of knee injuries forced them to cancel more. Before long, the entire tour was off. The press pinned it on Dolores' exhaustion, and that was at least partially true. She was near a nervous breakdown. What followed was a stretch of silence. The band members went to ground. Months passed without contact. Dolores later admitted in an interview that she'd been in a dark place, depressed and resentful of everything. She hated performing and hated being in the Cranberries. She fantasized about having a normal, boring job, being a hairdresser or a shop clerk, anything but an international rock star. What saved her was motherhood. In 1997, she gave birth to her first child, and the experience brought her out of the darkness. That sense of perspective reshaped her entire approach. When the Cranberries reconvened, they decided they no longer needed to chase the insane commercial success that took a toll on their well-being. They wanted a healthier balance. Their fourth album, Bury the Hatchet, emerged in 1999. Behind the scenes, Island Records had merged with other companies, creating a corporate environment that felt different from the scrappy label they'd signed with. Nonetheless, the band made an effort to speak to the press more openly, to quell rumors that they were on the brink of a breakup. Sales were moderate, 2.3 million worldwide, and the album was certified gold in the U.S. Not exactly the blockbuster days of Zombie, but good enough to keep them afloat creatively. Dolores seemed reinvigorated, trusting the band dynamic over any illusions of going solo. They followed it up in 2002 with Wake Up and Smell the Coffee. By then, all band members were in a more settled phase, many married with children. Dolores, for instance, gave birth to her second child during its recording. Tracks like Never Grow Old and Pretty Eyes exuded a more mature, almost serene vantage point. Yet the industry had changed drastically. They ended up on MCA, another result of label consolidation. And although the album sold over 1 million copies, it lacked any major radio triumph. The band's contract disputes and dissatisfaction with the label's promotional support led them to cut ties. By 2003, the Cranberries announced they would take an indefinite hiatus. They needed freedom, both personally and artistically. Dolores wanted to be home with her family, and each member felt it was time to explore individual passions. That break lasted until 2009, when they decided to give the band another shot. Life, however, had more twists in store for Dolores. She struggled with prescription medication and alcohol, and her marriage to Don Burton crumbled in 2014. That same year, she was arrested for causing a disturbance on a flight and even headbutting a police officer. She escaped jail time but was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. For someone who had long buried her traumas, childhood abuse, the suffocating pace of 90s fame, these events suggested her psyche was demanding attention. In a way, it forced her to confront issues she'd kept locked away, and she began therapy. During this period of flux, she relocated to New York, living a mostly nomadic existence from one hotel to another. In the midst of it all, she formed a new band called DARK, collaborating with Andy Rourke of The Smiths and DJ Ole Koretsky. Their 2016 album, Science Agrees, flew under the radar for mainstream audiences, but showed Dolores' willingness to experiment with electronic textures and moody, introspective themes. Meanwhile, her old Cranberries bandmates noticed a shift. She seemed clearer, more balanced when they reconvened. Therapy and a proper course of medication for her bipolar disorder appeared to help. They put out something else in 2017, featuring acoustic and orchestral reworkings of classic Cranberries tracks, along with some new material. Dolores' voice, stripped back, still retained that unmistakable Celtic sorrow and delicate power. Then came 2018. Despite the turbulence in her life, Dolores was on a creative upswing. She planned to work on a follow-up album with DARK, had further ideas for the Cranberries, and was also set to collaborate with the American rock band Bad Wolves on a cover of Zombie. In a final twist of fate, she never made it to the studio. On January 15th, she was found unresponsive in her London hotel bathroom. According to reports, the night before she'd left voicemails brimming with positivity. She talked about her kids, her excitement for upcoming projects, and even her enthusiasm that Eminem had sampled Zombie on one of his new tracks, In Your Head. It seemed like she was on the cusp of another creative renaissance. When the coroner's report came out, it classified her death as an accidental drowning in the bathtub with an elevated blood alcohol level. Prescription drugs in her system were at a therapeutic dose, suggesting that it wasn't an intentional overdose or anything. She was just 46, a figure who had once soared so high on the wings of her unique gift, brought down by an accident in a lonely hotel room. The shock rippled worldwide. Tributes poured in from fans, celebrities, and fellow musicians who recognized her singular contribution to music. Bad Wolves decided to release their cover of Zombie a few days after her passing, although members of the Cranberries felt uneasy about the timing and the optics. Regardless, the track soared to the top of the rock charts, and Bad Wolves donated $250,000 of the proceeds to Dolores' children, a gesture meant to honor the woman who was supposed to record with them that day. In 2019, The Cranberries released In the End, a final album built around demos Dolores had recorded. To hear her voice on brand new tracks posthumously is both a gift and a gut punch. The band members, Noel, Mike, and Fergal, worked tenderly to finish those songs, striving to honor Dolores's last creative sparks without distorting them. After that, the Cranberries announced they would not continue without her, ending the group's remarkable run. It was the close of a chapter that had started in that basement in Limerick all those years ago, the moment they heard Dolores's voice and realized she was the missing piece.